Elections are what bring change to this country through different representatives, through different presidents. So how does all that work? What are campaigns and what are these electoral processes, if you will? Well, for starters, if you're going to be a politician, you've got to know it in your bones. It's got to be in your blood. You've got to have excellent communication skills, and you've got to be ready to kiss those babies. After all, it's not a science, but an art. Now, the first kind of election we're going to look at is a primary election. So I want you to think of football, if you will. Before we even get to the Super Bowl, we have two divisions of teams that fight it out for the ultimate prize of getting to go against one another in the Super Bowl, right? Well, similarly, primaries are party elections so that instead of having 5 or 6 Democrats on the ballot, you've got one. Instead of having 5 or 6 Republicans on the ballot, you get to one, and then that Republican and that Democrat have it out in what we call a general election. Now, a primary election feels like a regular election because if you are a Democrat and you want to vote in the Democrat primary, you show up at your polling place, you choose only from the list of Democrats that you want to represent you, and then you go about your business. A caucus is a little bit different. Imagine, if you will, a big gathering, a big get-together of people who like all sorts of different candidates. Again, all of the same party. But let's say you have 5 Republican candidates running and you're going to the Republican caucus. This is an opportunity where everybody says out loud, where everybody in the room can hear exactly what you think about that candidate. Throughout the course of the evening, you might directly change somebody's mind, and so people walk across to the different camps until the final tally's called, and wherever you're standing in a room or a convention center or an auditorium, that's how many delegates or votes a particular candidate gets. Most people have a slight issue with that because it's not private. I can go into a voting booth and nobody is ever going to know who I voted for. A caucus, by definition, is something where people are going to know who you stand for and who you want to win. After these primary elections and these primary caucuses, this is the big November battle that we always think about. That's the general election. And I want to say this first. If you've only ever voted in the general election, if you haven't voted at all, you need to look into getting registered to vote. But if you've only ever voted in the general election, I encourage you, in order to grow as a citizen, get involved in some primary elections as well. These are often some of the most important elections to vote in because you directly get to say which candidates are going to battle it out together. Now, on election night, we'll talk about the president here. What happens? How does the president get elected? Is it across the nation, whoever got more votes? No. We have what's called the Electoral College. So I want you to stop thinking about election night as one big national election, and instead think of it as 50 individual state elections for President of the United States. They all happen to be on the same night, that's convenient, but each state submits their results, and each state has a certain number of electoral votes that go to the president. You need 270 to win, and if you get those votes, if you get 270, you will win. Now, most states, except for Maine and Nebraska, give all of their electoral votes to whoever wins. Whether you win the state by 1 vote or you win the state by 1,000,000 votes, all of those electors go to you. And as president, you're just trying to get to that magic number of 270. Now, how does the role of money in campaigns and elections work? Well, of course, you want money from donors, but corporations also like to donate, but they can't necessarily give that cash straight to the candidate themselves. So what they do is they set up political action committees, or PACs. And I encourage you to read up on this because there's a lot of good information about how PACs operate, what they can do, what their advantages are, but what they can't do as well. Now, unfortunately, voter turnout across the nation is not as high as we would like it to be. There are a variety of factors for this, but the more people vote, the more representation we can then say we have. Absentee voting would be a better alternative for if you're not at home, if you're overseas, or if you're elderly, let's say, and you can't get out, but not enough people take advantage of this opportunity to vote in advance. Now, There's a lot of debate around political parties. Are they good? Are they bad? They have a very negative connotation, but a political party is a way to organize the thoughts, the ideals, the values of one particular group of people and organize around those values to achieve change. So you have, of course, the debate of I vote for the person over politics, or you have the I vote for the policies over personality. So those are a little different, and ultimately it's up to you to decide how you want to vote, but political parties are designed to give us a very easy way in understanding these are my values, these are my beliefs, so I feel confident in voting for this individual, that candidate over there, that most, probably not all, but most of my values are going to be upheld. Third parties don't get a lot of say-so in our process, and a lot of citizens become disgruntled by that fact, but I'll give you a very quick explanation as to why. In the United States, we do our coalition building before an election. Not everybody's going to agree. Even within the Republican Party, you have your conservative movement, more moderate. With the Democrat Party, you have your more progressives and you have your more moderate. So why are the conservatives and the moderates, or the progressives and the moderates, why do they all fall under one party umbrella? Well, that's because we have what's called first past the post in our country. So you actually don't have to win a majority in the general election. You just have to get more than everybody else you're running against to win the election. Now think about that. If 5 people run, is it likely that somebody's going to get a majority? Probably not. We don't want to live in a society where the winner maybe happens to only get 33, 34% of the vote. That means that the vast majority actually did not want that candidate. So what we have, and why third parties don't get as much influence, is because rather than risk that, well, I really wanted to vote for candidate C, but candidate A is likely to win. Candidate B is second place and kind of similar to my preferred candidate. Well, then I'm just going to throw my weight behind that candidate, one of the 2 major parties, because I want somebody at least that has some semblance of my value set to win. You can read more on third parties, and there are a lot of great resources out there to really understand why third parties aren't as prominent as you might expect. Ultimately, campaigning elections, it's a long drawn out process. Right before the election, you are inundated with ads on TV, on the internet, in your email, even on social media. But it's all for a purpose. Ultimately, if we are going to maintain a representative democracy, representative government, the way we choose our representatives is they have to sell themselves to us, but more importantly, we have to be involved in the process. Get out there and vote.